Lucien is a Massachusetts marijuana attorney and entrepreneur. Laury grew up in Haiti. She moved to Boston, Massachusetts at the age of 15 during her senior year of high school to further her education. She went on to obtain a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a Juris Doctorate degree from Suffolk University Law School. Laury began her legal practice by working in healthcare and life sciences, as well as business licensing, corporate services, and mergers and acquisitions. She is the co-founder of Major Bloom, an EEA business with 2 provisional licenses and a various vertically integrated local HCAs and permits.
So today it's the perfect person to join this class because it's my better half, my second half of this venture into legal cannabis. My business partner, her name is Laury Lucien. She is in Boston now, born in Haiti, and just one of the smartest people I know, one of the funniest people I know, and part of the influence of me being a professor, especially in cannabis, is that she also teaches and developed a cannabis class at Suffolk University. So without further ado, AKA Big Mama, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I'm going to make one amendment. That is that I was born in Boston. I secured the American passport bag, but then I was raised in Haiti. Okay, secured the culture bag.
Right. No, I feel that. And that's important because you talk a lot about how you were raised in Haiti and it gives you a different perspective here coming back to the States.
Absolutely.
So, why don't we talk a little bit about your past experience and, years in the cannabis industry? Why are you in the cannabis industry?
Boom. So, I can start by telling you a little bit about myself and then dive into how I ended up in the cannabis industry. And so I didn't grow up here, like you mentioned. I grew up in Port-au-Prince. I was able to graduate a little bit early. So during my senior year, I was 15. I asked my parents, can I come to America? They said yes. 2 weeks later, I was in the United States on a pursuit of a full scholarship. And but I luckily ended up getting the full scholarship because that's what I came here for, and went to UMass Amherst, went into biology, right? I thought I was going to be a doctor because that's what all Haitians want you to be, right? Either a doctor or a nurse or a engineer, and I wasn't trying to be none of those. And so I was a research tech at Mass General doing cancer research for a while, and that really is that experience plays a key role in my presence in the cannabis industry, because to me it's not just about a plant. This is a plant that has medicinal impacts and that really have therapeutic impacts on people who are suffering. So that's where that came from then. But then I didn't know I was going to be in marijuana because, to be honest, I went to a very Christian school in Haiti, and I was such a goody goody, shout out to UMass Amherst for breaking that down, because I went to UMass so conservative. I was basically a white man from Mississippi. Those are my. I was not pro-life. I mean, I was in pro-choice, pro nothing. And then I took a women's studies class, and then I was introduced to fraternities and sororities, and that opened my mind up, and I became extremely liberal. I don't like the word liberal. I like the word accepting. I more so accept people's perspectives and don't take anything that people feel personally, because that ain't got nothing to do with me. So we at UMass Amherst. I graduated from UMass, and now I'm doing cancer research. I ended up getting hit by a car, right? And I was out of commission for 9 months. In the midst of the time where I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? My parents are like, you just have a bachelor's degree. What are you doing? You're a bum. You have to go to school. So I'm like, okay, I got to find something to do. So I end up talking to my little sister, and I'm like, Ashley, what am I going to do? She's like, I know this patent lawyer. He's black, and he's making $2 million a year. I was like, what? A lawyer? And she was like, yeah, if you have a science degree, you can become a patent attorney. I'm like, what does it take? She says law school is 3 years. I'm like, what you got to know? She said nothing. I was like, what I got to do? She's like, girl, prepare for the LSAT. I'm like, I'm doing it. And so after 20 minutes the following day, I was preparing for the LSAT. And so I did well, ended up going to law school. While I'm in law school, 2012, what happened? Marijuana became legal, right? And meanwhile, if we can go back in the story, when I moved to America, a cousin of mine, I'm gonna blow his spot, Jeffrey Louisiana, introduced me to cannabis. It was Thanksgiving, and Jeffrey had come back from college, and my aunt had made so many sweet potato pies, and Jeffrey was like, "Yo, Laury, you want to try this weed?" And I was a little conflicted because I was still very Christian, but I'm like, you must had already begun breaking that down, So I was like, okay. So I went out, smoked, and it was so amazing. Like it unlocked the hard part of me and allowed me to be so like myself for the first time. And I was creative, and I went in and tore up those pies, bro.
Yeah.
Like rest in peace.
I never heard that story. Yeah, that's crazy. I said I never heard that story.
And one thing I want you to know, I'm gonna remember Jeffrey Louisa introduced me to marijuana.
Right.
So now it's 2012. Marijuana is medical, and I'm at M in law school. And y'all know I didn't really want to go to be a lawyer, which is something I was doing because of the money. So I'm like, damn, okay. So how about if I ever get an opportunity to get into marijuana, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
And so I keep trucking through my life. I end up doing really well in law school and get hired to be a corporate healthcare attorney doing mergers and acquisitions. In that job, I was helping license large pharmacies throughout the entire country, also doing it for various healthcare companies. And I became very skilled at licensing heavily regulated entities. And that's when I called Jeffrey. I was like, Jeffrey, I really want to get into marijuana, and I don't know how to do it. Jeffrey's like, yo, my boy Tyrone Gomes. Tyrone was his roommate, I believe, in college, and he connected me to Tyrone, and that's how I started to learn about the industry itself. And so you see how Jeffrey Bing Bang connected us twice,
right,
through this industry, and it was also one of Jeffrey's friends who connected me to Kamani Jefferson.
It was one of your cousin's friends?
One of Jeffrey's friends connected me to Kamani Jefferson.
Big shout out to your cousin.
Big shout out. And Kamani Jefferson really got me embedded. Shout out to MRCC. Got me embedded into the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. And as I began to go through networking events, you and I met.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. That was a long way to explain that, but I'm glad y'all came on the journey.
No, I think it's important because this is the first week. We're talking about being present in cannabis here, and you're the first person I'm interviewing out of 12 people. You know what I mean? So Joe Gilmore is one of those people. Jessica's one of those people. Chanel. So it all comes together essentially.
Boom boom.
So what else do we have? So we're here now, 2020. You and I co-founded Major Bloom, and we met back in 2017, kind of as you mentioned, through MRCC. A common question that comes up in the industry is federal legalization. And I think this is one of the most gifted parts of you is how you understand like what has happened in the nation. It's not just Massachusetts or here in Boston or Worcester. It's really what happened, in the United States. So how far are we from legalization at the federal level? And then what does it look like?
How far are we? It's pretty interesting because if you're looking at what's happening with the presidential elections currently, everybody got a little something to say about marijuana, right? So it's making me feel like marijuana is no greater than 10 years away. And if Biden were to win, he said he would leave regulations up to the states, which is what Jimmy Carter wanted to do. And we see how that ended up playing out. So I think that's a in Creole we call it lash. Oh, it's a cowardly way out. It's like not taking a stand on something is right. And that to me is problematic. But the other side, the Republicans, Trump hasn't come down on marijuana, which is one of the biggest fears we had coming into this.
Right. So you talked about Jimmy Carter a little bit, and we know what happened when he wanted to decriminalize. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Oh yeah, Jimmy Carter. I don't know if a lot of people would realize he ran on a marijuana platform. He wanted marijuana to be legal. But he did not want to interfere with state rights. So instead of having a federal law allowing cannabis, he said states should just go for it and do it on their own. And Jimmy's policies didn't make it.
Right. So I think when you talk about decriminalization or leaving it up to the states, we see that a lot of states do the decriminalize and then go to medical market. Do you see that happening at the federal government level? Will we see medical first? Will we see decriminalization first? And then also, what about the inequities that are in those programs, like in Massachusetts, like New Jersey or New York, where the disparities are so high? So how does that impact, medical?
So had you asked me this question before George Floyd, I might have said it would have been incremental. The reason why it's incremental is because we are still fighting the stigmas that are false, right? That were started by the media and the federal government, making people fearful of the impacts of cannabis, right? So because we were fighting a lot of those stigmas, a lot of the social injustice that is rooted in those stigmas have just been washed away. Now, after the George Floyd murder, and the fact that people are waking up to the massive levels of systemic racism that is rampant throughout this country, the conversation is changing now. Now people are not looking at it solely. The reason why it had to be moved incrementally is because we had to move people's minds along with the stigma. They had to be okay with it, like it was like alcohol, you know. But now that we're looking at these people are in jail because the government was colluding. It was part of a system to really marginalize a group of people. That information is coming out. So I think if the federal government is going to write something in this climate, it really has to take into consideration its role in prohibition, what it has and what it's done in the environment it's created, you know? And so I think it's gonna be pretty tough to force it incrementally. And
Right.
and to be fair, they've already done it incrementally. Because at the federal government level, there is an amendment that prevents the Department of Justice from using its funds to enforce marijuana laws against state legal medical dispensaries.
What is that? What is that called again?
I think it's I can't pronounce it, Bacher Amendment.
Oh, no doubt.
I'm not from here, so some of these words, they still be whooping me.
No, but I think you're right in terms of the incremental, because we obviously seen that at a state level. The question, how do you balance, patient safety or caring for patients while also balancing social equity? Because right now, I feel like there isn't a really good balance for that. So what are some ideas that you have around
So for me, I think that it's still misunderstanding the plant, right? Because ultimately, is there any difference between marijuana that is for a patient than marijuana that's adult use in Massachusetts?
Right.
No. The difference is how you put it into your metric. So ultimately, I mean, obviously there's differences in the medical marijuana program in the sense that you can get cheap or free marijuana if you don't have access. But I think that should be the case for all businesses. Like if you're a low income person, you should be able to have reduced costs based on your income. So for me, when we start looking at humanity as opposed to these discrete units of people where we separate and say it's patients versus them versus that, I'm like, okay, I don't really give a damn about all that. Sorry if I'm cussing y'all. But what I care about is humanity. Because the person who may be there are people who don't look visibly ill and needed to go treat ailments that we can't see. And there are people who have ailments that they went to the doctor for that was diagnosed. So I'm not in a position to judge. And even our medical doctors aren't taking their role with the plant in a way where they're providing meaningful guidance.
Right.
So we're here just guiding ourselves from within. And because that's the environment we're in, we just have to make sure that people have access in general.
Absolutely.
And provide education.
Education, absolutely. But hence what we do, right?
Absolutely.
Why we're here. Just kind of going back to the incremental steps that you had mentioned before. What would it look like? And I feel like we've talked about this before. For a state to just go straight directly to rec. And what would it take? And do you think that it would be more of an equitable market if we were to have, not the decriminalization and the politics behind that and the politics behind the medical program, and we just go straight to, adult use? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that possibility is becoming greater with more states legalizing. To not have incremental change, the legislature would have to take control and just write out a law where they would just institute that. And people are always like, how are we going to do it? Bro, they brainwashed you with the media. You can brainwash people with good news, okay? You can start by talking about the medical aspects of it. You can, if you really wanted to, legislature, you could take a budget where you have a whole campaign about educating safely using cannabis if you really want to emphasize safety, okay? You could do that. And then talk about restorative justice. Talk about how legalizing marijuana isn't just about patients, but it's about the government repairing what they've done. They've used this plant to destroy entire communities, lives. And when you start realizing that 88% of the people in jail right now for marijuana is only for possession, you start feeling a little wrong about it. You start feeling like this needs to be legal because the way it's being enforced is completely unfair.
Right. Right. No, that's a great. I mean, we're open up to Big Mama right now.
Oh,
I'm feeling that.
bro.
And for those, if I haven't said it already, that it's her nickname. So and I feel like this next question too, we've kind of talked about this a little bit before, and we've seen it with, I think it was a law school in Michigan where they had specific language around race and how they wanted to increase the race of Black students, I believe it was, or even maybe Latino or Latinx. Why don't we see that written in these equity laws on a local level? And on a federal level, is it possible to see something of that magnitude? To say, hey, we know that this race has been harmed the most by prohibition, and we want to start to repair that. So, just your perspective on that.
Right. So that really comes from, like you were talking about, the Michigan. I think there was a case out in Florida too, where schools had these affirmative action provisions where they would, and affirmative action is the rebranded social equity, y'all. They try to fool you, but that's literally what they're trying to. So they had these affirmative action provisions where they would literally give more points to people who were Black or brown or indigenous, etc. And this white girl did not get in because her grades were insufficient, and she got upset. This one was in Michigan and sued. And I think, ultimately when they went up to the Supreme Court used strict scrutiny, because when they're assessing whether a law equally protects people, it's like the Equal Protection Clause, it gets really boring. When they're assessing that, they apply these different standards. So if it has to do with race, they use the strictest standard. And it's stupid because they used to use the strictest standard to protect you, to say if a law is being racist. But this time they're saying even if the law is pro reparation, they're gonna apply strict scrutiny. And so nothing passes strict scrutiny, bro. Like nothing gets through. And so as a result, because of that, whenever a municipality is trying to write a law and they use race as a core category, they're afraid that it will not pass the muster of strict scrutiny and will be deemed unconstitutional. And so now they have to skirt around it by, let's find the areas most impacted by the wrong drug. How much money do you make? And blah, blah, blah. And it's just fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous, bro. Like, it's stupid. And the thing is, we as a people, we've all agreed to this.
Right.
And I know we may say like, yeah, but the Supreme Court decided, and nah, be like, as a people, we have the right to march through our legislature and say, we need you to write this law. And well, they're going to say it's unconstitutional anyways. It's like we're in a catch-22.
Right. No, it makes sense. And you talked a little bit about
the private sector can do anything they want.
The private sector, you said? Like businesses?
Businesses to a certain extent, but they're going to trap you with interstate commerce.
Right.
And that, yeah, you can't discriminate.
So you were alluding a little bit to some of the criterias when we talk about an equity program, how it's not necessarily about race. And the state here, Massachusetts, has the social equity program and the economic empowerment program, which Major Bloom, our business, is in. Now, with particularly calling out race, what do you see the differences between the two programs, social equity and economic empowerment? And then also, we can dive into the difference between a positive impact plan and a diversity plan, because they're all like programs, like social programs, but they all have different meanings.
Right. So the difference between the economic empowerment program and the social equity program. So let's start with economic empowerment. Economic empowerment was a program designed for people who wanted to economically empower, or who actually were involved in economically empowering neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. In these neighborhoods, when I say that, it's a real term. A neighborhood that has been disproportionately impacted is a neighborhood. It's one of 29 neighborhoods that the CCC identified as having been most harmed based on the number of arrests for marijuana. So an economic empowerment certificate, if you were able to apply within that short window they gave in 2018, was it?
2018. Yeah.
In 2018, you had to prove 3 of 6 things. You had to prove that you either worked for a company that directly helped those neighborhoods, that you volunteered with a company that help those neighborhoods, that you're going to hire at least 75% of your population from those areas, or you're going to hire 75% of your population from people who have a quarry, either that you're black, white, the diversity, black, in that. See how it was one of 6 factors and it wasn't the factor? And then I think the last one was kind of like your volunteer experience. I can't remember what it was, but if you met 3 out of the 6, you got to have economic empowerment.
Right.
Because it proved that you're the kind of person, I guess, who would be willing to continue to do those things. Social equity is different. That one's designed to help people who've been harmed by the war on drugs enter the marijuana industry. So you either have to have a marijuana charge, your spouse or your sibling has a marijuana charge, or you live in one of those 29 neighborhoods and have income is within like 400% of the poverty level. Mm-hmm. That's what the requirements are. And as part of the social equity program, you get to attend classes that the CCC created in order to educate you on how to go through licensing and operate your business as well. And those 2 programs come with like benefits, like reduced fees, the economic empowerment priority program. It gives you priority when you apply, so your application gets reviewed first.
So that's the difference between those 2 programs. And then no matter what program you're in, what license type you have, any business that operates in the state needs to have a direct impact plan and also a positive impact plan. So what's the difference between those two programs as well?
Right. The direct impact plan is a plan that is designed to economically improve one of the 29 neighborhoods that I had referred to. So, and not only is it designed to affect one of those neighborhoods, but they have these targeted groups that you're supposed to choose from. People who have who have convictions, economic empowerment, social equity applicants. They have the categories. So you have to identify a category and then identify a program that you're going to implement that's going to directly impact those neighborhoods. You can also do neighborhood cleanup. You can have incubator programs. There are various ways that you can economically empower those neighborhoods, but you have to submit that plan to the CCC. The diversity one, the marijuana statute requires the CCC to institute regulations that will require the industry to be diverse. So in carrying out that obligation, they're requiring every marijuana establishment to provide them a diversity plan. And that's the company's plan to ensure that they're going to maintain diversity in their business, and in their hiring practices and in their contracting practices.
Very good. So that's a good segue to like a question specifically for you as a boss in this industry. Some of the times we have conference calls and you're the only female, day after day. How do you feel those gender discrepancies exist for you? I mean, and for other women that are in this
man, I think it does, so I think very differently than a lot of people, in the sense that I know that I manifest my current reality. And if there is any kind of thing in my external world that's imbalanced, I see it as a direct reflection of my internal state.
Absolutely.
And so I think that I haven't even noticed really the impact within our dynamic where, I'm a woman and it's making a difference because I use it to my advantage. I think for me, because I'm also a fighter, I'm a second-degree black belt. Everything I've been dealt, I look at it as every punch I can block.
Right.
So, and when you punch me, you actually leave yourself open for my attack, no matter how you. So if you come in with sexism, that's amazing. Thank you. Now I know your cards, and I know a big thing about a sexist is they don't want to be called out to be a sexist. So now you're gonna be on your P's and Q's, and so now I got you. So it's about, like, for me, I don't fight with sexism and racism directly.
Right.
The way that in these settings, the way I do it is I use it against you the moment you play your cards. Okay. Right. You've seen it. You've seen us do it.
Oh, of course.
It makes people really, really uncomfortable.
Right.
But do I wish there were more women? Obviously. Sometimes when you want to I think sometimes I'm always around men so much. It makes me a little tougher than I want to be all the time. And shout out to you for always hiring women.
Yeah, that's true. Our intern, and I mean, we talk about the diversity plan. I feel like ours. I haven't personally seen like too many that were as lofty as ours. I mean, veterans that we have on our team and commitment. So I think it makes for a better organization. To be honest with you, when you're able to have a diverse workforce and not just the one kind of perspective, so to speak. So I just want to kind of go back to the social equity portion a bit and the equity in general across the nation, not just Massachusetts. So right now we know that the industry isn't very much diverse. I think when I interviewed Shakia, she had mentioned that the workforce and the ownership is basically 75% white male here in Massachusetts. And it was one of the first states, if not the first state, to have an equity program. So not to say that the program's failing, it's just that we're not very diverse and basically hitting the mission now. And we can say that this be the same for across the nation's landscape. So what are some of the pros that you see in the times that we're in, even though it's not very diverse? Like it can only get better. Like what are I guess some of the good things about being present in where we are right now?
The good thing about being present where we are right now is that we are we're creating an industry. Like everything we say matters, really. The legislature, the CCC, they listen to what we're saying. They had made a decision recently to drop the ownership of control for social equity for economic empowerment down to, I think it was like 30%, 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And within like a week they reversed it. And so we do have a lot of power. And so I love that. I love being part of something that's just being built. In terms of positives about being in the industry, that's it. Because the other part because to me it's a little disheartening with the social equity and economic empowerment program, not because they're failing in particular, but because you can't look at those programs outside of the environment that we're in, the environment of systemic racism, where the way that the law was written, you needed to have real estate. You need to have real estate in order for you to get a license. Well, licensing process can take you over up to beyond a year, and you're paying rent on those properties. Who can afford to do that except the very rich, except those who are connected to people who are very rich? And we also know that we're living in an environment where the federal government is not, the federal government said that marijuana is illegal. As a result, banks are not permitted to really participate in the industry. So people didn't have institutions they could go to for funding. And let the record show, those institutions don't lend to people who look like me anyway. Matter of fact, they don't even loan to white women. So what would make us think that we would be the people getting the loans to start these businesses or businesses? Okay, so you're asking these people to get property, to get money, and let's talk about the medical marijuana program, where they were asking you for $500,000 of liquid assets for you to show in order for you to submit the first section of your application. That you don't even know if you're going to get through the entire licensing process. That could take a whole year. Like, do you see how these issues, like if you were really thinking about equity, right? You were really thinking about making this a system that was fair. You would think about the issues that people who look like us, people who the law actually was designed to marginalize. You would think about what we needed, but no, there was a $500,000 for you first, $400,000 for your next two. It had to be vertically integrated, meaning that you have to raise at least $10 million to get into medical. So that was just atrocious and ridiculous. So, and then you get into rec, and you still need real estate. You need to have an agreement with the municipality. In the process of obtaining that agreement is difficult. If you don't have an attorney on your team, you're gonna have to hire somebody, okay? Because you're negotiating a contract with the municipality. So there are all these barriers that people didn't see.
I want to talk a little bit about you teaching in the equity program. Obviously, you explained what the difference is between economic empowerment and social equity, and how there's a little bit of training. So how was that experience for you?
Well, that experience was really rejuvenating, because being in the cannabis industry can be extremely draining. I mean, it ain't for the faint of heart, you know it. And so when I taught my first class and I walked into the room, I just felt so energized by it, because I felt like I was actually making a difference, I was answering questions that people had that I knew people would charge them like $500-$600 an hour to sit with them and give them this information. And so being able to mobilize people with information and having the state pay for it, that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, so for those that don't know, the social equity, as we kind of explained before, is part of the state's program. So when she talks about being paid for the state, it's through the CCC. Um, and you also did some work, ground level, grassroots work on the economic empowerment side. So you registered our business, but then you
Yes,
also did some work to mobilize there.
I did. So when I realized that we only had, I think it was a 2-week window to get people in this, and it was over, I partnered with this girl I was working with, Saskia, and we just rocked out of this work share space and invited people to come, and I would just do the application for them. And people were actually volunteering. We had a notary public come and volunteer their time to notarize documents for us. So it was all hands on deck, and we were able to get about upwards of 16 people registered.
Big shout out! Wow, that's
Boom, boom,
amazing.
boom, boom, boom.
So we wanna shift gears just a little bit and talk about police reform. Wow,
Boom.
police reform. So where do you see the intersection between cannabis and police reform? And then how is, and going back to the federal government, like how do they play a role in reform? Right now we're seeing with George Floyd, there's a lot of cities popping up talking about defunding the police. We definitely don't hear it at a federal level. So how do those, play?
Right. So what we know that the federal government doesn't really prosecute marijuana cases. Like that's not what they're doing. I think only 10% of the people are for federal. So this really needs to happen on a state level. Because if you realize how state police get funded, you'll realize that the issue is a lot of them are very scared that they're going to lose their jobs once we legalize marijuana. And let me break this down to you. There are these grants that they get from the federal government, and the police can get this grant, and I think there's 8 categories that they can use this money for. They can use it for law enforcement, they can use it for education, they can use it for a host of other reasons besides policing communities. But a lot of them, they choose to use the money, like the vast majority of them, for police enforcement. And in order for, as a condition for them getting this money for this category, they have to meet quotas for arrest. And the arrests do not have to be felonies. They can be misdemeanors. Okay. So in order for these people to meet their quotas, they have to get these cops. And get this, you're like, Laury, why don't they just go after hard crimes? Like they're freaking stealing kids off the streets all the time. Human trafficking is at an all-time high. Why are they focusing on marijuana? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because it takes a lot of money to train a cop to go after a human trafficker. It takes a lot of time and effort and resources to train a police officer how to go after a high-level drug dealer. Do you know what it takes to teach a cop how to pat and frisk somebody? Right. Nothing, because these bullies have been doing it since high school. Don't shoot me though. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And the reason I'm picking it, because the ones who are doing it were the bullies. I'm not saying they're all bullies, but if you're bullying people as a cop now, you must have been you ain't just learned it now. Right. Okay, they're not all bad, but the ones that are. So that's the biggest fear. And where does this come from? Is it Laury? Are you spewing conspiracy? No. Because you remember what happened in the NCIA meeting, where it was a closed meeting in Boston with the police department, and even the press wasn't allowed in. And then what ended up coming out in the paper was the reason it was closed is because the police wanted a platform or an environment where they could discuss cannabis and openly state that they are afraid that they are going to be unemployed if there is an end to federal prohibition.
Wow.
That's amazing. You see?
Yeah, well, just going back to some of the points you made about funding, you listed those 8 buckets, or you talked about those 8 buckets. And more recently, and this is for the class to know, like full transparency, with Laury and I being in business together, you work with Eon, and you read was it a bill yesterday, right? You talk about that. Take it from there.
All right, there's a bill currently in the House where they want to use money from the cannabis fund, like money from marijuana tax, to give money to the police to fund their training. Mind you, they haven't even funded equity. Right. Like there are businesses right now that can't open because they don't have money.
Right.
There are people right now who have been in the industry in the underground, people who have paid their price in prison, which is a price they shouldn't have paid in the first place, who can't open. But you want to fund the police, I've just explained to you how they're getting funded, how they're doing it for just because they don't want to pay and train cops to go after the real bad guys who are snatching children. who are planning to, you know what I'm saying? Who are planning real awful, heinous crimes.
Right. So what do we do? What do we do to prevent that, though? I mean, that's probably.
Well, we've got to keep educating people. I think the media took the word defund the police and ran with it, and they're use sensationalizing it and making people really afraid. When what they should be saying is, let's restructure the police.
Reallocate.
Let's reallocate funds. Let's have the police do what they're best at, and then remove those tasks that they're not great at doing.
Right.
Let's reallocate funds, and let's also remove qualified immunity.
What is that?
So basically, a cop can do whatever they want without having fear of being prosecuted for it. My thing is the same thing they say to us. Well, if you ain't doing nothing wrong, you shouldn't be afraid if they search you, huh? Well, if you ain't doing nothing wrong, you shouldn't be afraid of being brought to justice for it, huh? Right. I'm just saying, we gotta have this shit be equal.
Right. No, you're spot on there.
Sorry for being so spicy, whoever's watching this.
No. Yeah, just so you know, I mean, I think I've told you before, like last class I taught, I had a police chief in it. You know, he was a police chief here. A lot of municipal leaders, had a couple state employees. So it's really a diverse background of people that are in like leadership positions, you know?
Right.
And your perspective is valued, which is why I asked you to be on here along with everyone else that is a part of this. So I think, in what is the common theme with like kind of the question involving the police is whether or not cannabis money should be going there to fund them. And it seems like it should be the opposite, right? Like they should be reallocating their funds to go to equity, right? Not,
absolutely.
You know.
They should be reallocating their funds to go to social justice programs.
Right.
We're not saying so they're talking about all these issues. Homelessness is an issue. We always got to come out. Oh, great. We won't need you for overtime if these homeless people actually have a place to live. Right. You see how that's resolved? We won't need to come and deal with people who are using substances if those people were able to get the help that they deserve. You see how that's resolved? But instead, we want to keep this system where we need to have these people there for them to police and for them to go after. If we just reshifted it, we wouldn't need all that overtime, you know? And that's one of the first things people are removing. It's the excessive amount of overtime that they need. Right. If those funds can be spent fixing the problem for which they need the overtime in the first place, we don't need them. And we don't want police. Actually, we all would love to live in a place where police doesn't exist because we want to live in a place where people are peaceful and people are loving and people. Well, my dream is for us to live in a world where there is no police. There's no FBI because everybody loves each other.
Right.
So in order for us to get to that place, something's got to give. We've got to start allocating funds in a way where people are not enemy, but people are we look at individuals as people who need help, and we use our funds from the government to help those people get better. What is a 16-year-old doing in jail for selling drugs? What's a 16-year-old doing in jail for fighting? What's a 16-year-old doing in jail for stealing? Do you know why? Because that's somebody who needs help. That person needs love. They don't need to be locked up and let me tell you, don't get me started. You want to talk about police reform, social justice reform? Locking up children is atrocious to me.
Let's dive into like some of the speed questions here.
Let's go.
We can, we'll have to pick this up. You know, get you.
I'll get fired up because people just accept that. People just accept that there are kids in jail right now.
Right.
Like there's 7, 8. They put 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay. All right. All right.
I feel you. All right, cool. So let's dive into these speed questions here. So these are more like cultural questions.
Ooh.
Your favorite marijuana or drug movie or documentary?
My favorite marijuana drug. Oh, I have to say Pineapple Express.
Okay.
Pineapple Express is the best movie on the history of movies.
It's not just because it deals with weed.
No, it's about friendship. I learned so much.
That's true. That is true.
It's about surviving. Right. I mean, obviously coming to America, like that's a different category, but like, weed movie, it's got a Pineapple Express.
Oh, that's great.
Like when he was so hurt, like he thought he had formed this genuine friendship with I forget the bigger dude. Yeah. And like, the guy just hurt his feelings. Dude, I gave you my shirt when you were cold. Like, that's a real sentiment, bro. Like,
Oh, what about musician or music? Most
uh,
influential.
most influential, man. I would say that I don't really know if I have a single musician that's influential.
Or genre? Genre's good, cool too.
Hmm. Because I've been messed. I think it depends on the phase of my life and what I need it for. I will tell you what got me through. Before every single exam that I took for law school, I listened to fucking bitches, fucking problems by ASAP Rocky. Like before every single exam, people try to talk like, nah, I love bad bitches because I don't know what it was about the that, and it might have been that little intro, but I listened to the entire song before every exam. So shout out to ASAP,
Yeah.
fucking Kendrick Lamar. I'm
Oh,
Kendrick Lamar. This is like, come on, like,
Big Sean is on that too, right?
is he?
Is he on it? Or Drake? Is it Drake?
Drake is on
Drake
there.
is on
Drake.
it. Word.
So that's a powerful song. So I think like hip hop definitely played a big role in my life. Now that we're bringing it up, because when I moved to America, I was a big mama physically, and my cousins they would make fun of me, but only through rap. So they would be like, "Yo, Laurys so fat, she probably ate the cat," and I'm like, and I could not respond if I said anything that wasn't in a rap, I would just get laughed at.
Yeah,
And so I had to literally learn how to freestyle in order to get some respect. And by learning how to freestyle, it just opened me up to a different level of my artistry and
dude, that's so funny.
huh?
You never told me that your cousins used to rag you in raps.
Oh yes, they did. Yes, they did. That's the only reason why I know how to rap.
Yeah, dude. Oh, that's funny. All right, so what about books? What book, one or a few books that help you navigate your career? And I know you've recommended a bunch for me. So.
I know. So the first book I would start with is Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And the reason I'm giving you those books and not books like, oh, how to start a business is if you are an entrepreneur and you do not have the right mindset for this business, you will fail. Right. It's like it's 1+1 = 2. If you're missing the one, you ain't got two. You know what I mean? So you've got to have the right mindset. So Psycho-Cybernetics is a great book to get you started on the mission. So after you read Psycho-Cybernetics, you're gonna be all powered and to get yourself, working to get your millions to accomplish your goals. And then I want you to read The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav. Because what's gonna happen is once you start accumulating all this external stuff, I don't want you to get to a point in your life where you're 90 years old and you're like, all I have is stuff, but I don't have any character, I don't have any friends, and I realize this stuff doesn't mean anything. Right, so the book by Gary Zukav is going to teach you what actually to value, how to actually use your internal navigation system to get towards your passion and not just accumulating the false images of your passion.
Makes sense. Drop the materialism.
That's it, drop it.
You touched on this question a little bit about when and where you first got interacted with marijuana.
I must have been 17.
And then just what was it that you smoked? Was it a blunt?
I really couldn't tell you what. Oh, it was a blunt.
It was a blunt?
I got started with blunts. And, a lot of people think negatively of blunts, right, but I'm still a blunt smoker.
Yeah. So this next question, I kind of know the answer to this, having worked with you for 3+ years. How do your parents, your family feel about, perceived marijuana and then your career in marijuana?
Right. So my parents are of the boat Haitians, so they do not like marijuana. They don't. They think it's a drug, but they support me, and they're really trying to understand it. They're not like, "Oh, Laurie, stop the debt." Yeah, my mom would be like, "Laurie, you smoke too much," but she's she already knows I put hard boundaries over what she can tell me I can and cannot do in my life. Right. So she's very respectful of it, and I think she's very proud of what I'm doing in the industry. And I think what makes her proud is when I go out and people come and talk to her and tell her, "Yo, I love your daughter's great." Yeah. And I think that to her shows her that I'm not just out here for myself and I'm not just out here bullshitting. Like, I'm making a meaningful impact on people's lives, and that's what it's all about for her.
Last question for the culture here. Your strain, if you were a strain of marijuana or just your favorite strain, which one is it?
If I were a strain of marijuana, oh man. I mean, my favorite is Girl Scout cookies.
Okay.
Because it allows me to still be active and do me, but like still feel a little chill and mellow in the body.
Right, right.
My personality would be more like sour diesel.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, the diesel part is the part that really I want to emphasize on because yo, we lit.
So, what kind of final words wrapping up do you have for them?
Well, so my advice for you is the advice I like to always give myself. It's that whatever you want to accomplish in life, it absolutely is possible. I think that people forget that your imagination is actually a blueprint, and that if it's in your mind and you see it, you've actually begun to uncover the blueprint of the steps you need to make. Like, I think you can see it in your mind because you actually can accomplish it. And that's why I want you to read those 2 books. Because once you finish reading them, you'll remove all the thoughts and all the doubt that's in your mind that's really preventing you from getting to where you want to go. I truly believe you can be, do, or have anything you want on this planet. That's it. The difference between those who do accomplish that and those who don't is the mindset. If you think you can, you absolutely can. But the moment you start saying you can't, you won't. But you don't even need that much faith in yourself either. You just need this much. Like you really need a little bit. A little bit of faith goes
Is that
a long
is
way.
that the size of a
A
mustard seed?
mustard seed, yeah. Sometimes people think, like, the reason I say that is because people think that I'm like always confident, that I always believe 100% that I can do it. Y'all know how many times that my faith was, I didn't even know where it came from, where I was just moving, like where I didn't even know. It was like, well, I don't know if it's gonna work. I'm gonna try anyway.
It was
I'm
just
gonna
a
give it
couple
my
days
all.
ago. We were talking about a deal that potentially lost hope.
Yep.
Then like 2 days later, it was like, all right.
Let's bounce back. It's like a mustard seed. That's all you need to ignite you. So if you can find that mustard seed within you and apply it to the vision that's inside of you without judging it, okay? Because it's the judgment. Like, I don't want to draw. Even some of y'all are freaking the best designers in the planet. I don't want to sing. I don't anything that you really want to do, take that little mustard seed of faith, apply it to it, and watch it ignite.
All right, appreciate that. I'm sure the class didn't know that they were going to get a self worth. You know what I mean? But I think that's what's important though. Is the industry, we look at it so much as, no pun intended or pun intended, so much green and money and licensing this and zoning this and politics this, that like we forget that it's spiritual. You know what I mean? And it's more than just the box that we put it in as a society. So I think
Right.
it's important for us to.
And in fact, if it wasn't for us thinking like this, we might have quit a long time ago.
Right.
Like,
you and I.
yeah.
Right.
Like, if you didn't think the way that we did and we didn't have the mustard seed sometimes,
Absolutely.
like, we had so many reasons to just throw in the towel.
Right.
But it's people like Nipsey Hussle too that keep us going.
Absolutely. Every day. So it looks like you're ready to smoke.
Oh man, I am.
Yeah. We'll end on that note. Thank you again, Lo. I say it pretty often to her, but I want to repeat it again here. It's very rare to find someone who's extremely book smart, her being a lawyer, and then also being very personable, being in a position to bring out raw and good emotions in people while also educating and informing. So because she is a cannabis lawyer while also being a professor at Suffolk University, and then us being part of an economic empowerment social program here in Massachusetts, it gives us a perspective that's very unique. And for me personally, not only with her but with the rest of the interviews that we'll go through for the rest of the semester, it's really just opening up the network, opening up the conversation to figure out ways that we can do things better. So definitely on the front lines, definitely pioneering in the industry, and super grateful to partner with her and then also have her join this class. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode as well as the ones to come.